Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news session. Today is Friday, April 8th. I finished Mirror's Edge Calloused and boy is it just an awful game. Like, I had so much to complain about it, I didn't even remember to complain about the fact that they're literally, apparently there's yet another festival. It's a little too early to be doing another festival. Um, Event Synchro Festival and Forbidden List announcement. Maybe this will happen a little bit later. No, it seems like it starts Monday. But then it lasts for 10 days. Which seems like there may just always be an event. Certainly. There was a point very early in Mirror's Edge Catalyst where you saw somebody break in and steal some data off a computer simply because they hadn't introduced the hacker character or the ability for you to break in and steal the data, so you had to steal the hard drive from the person. They didn't even bother telling you or showing you who that person was or who he was working for. They left a ridiculous amount of plot threads hanging in Mirror's Edge Catalyst in some weird way to try and make it feel like it was a prequel to the original Mirror's Edge, but in no way it really could have been a prequel to Mirror's Edge. Instead, it's kind of this weird prequel to a potential Catalyst 2 that will just never ever happen because their focus in Mirror's Edge Catalyst made a much worse game than the original Mirror's Edge in almost every aspect. Like, on the core of it, having a more open world and having online abilities to make your own time trials and share that with your friends sounds like a good idea, but it only makes sense if you have that core experience. And frankly, they could have probably just copied the exact same level layouts and the exact same story from the original Mirror's Edge and just called Mirror's Edge a upgraded remake of the original Mirror's Edge. They would have had to change the story a little bit because they don't want it to seem like the bad guys were China, like the first game kind of made it fairly obvious that the bad guys were China, instead of making the bad guy more obviously Kruger from the beginning and a group of faceless oligarchs named the Conglomerate are really the bad guy. Which, by the way, you don't beat him at the end of the game. Not one bit. If anything, he oddly, just in a post-credit scene, is said to have died, and that your sister, who you were very caring about and on pretty great terms with by the end of the first game, in this game, by the end of this, your sister is straight up the Kruger replacement and the bad guy. There's no redemption arc at all. For no good reason. There's an entire character named Rebecca who's pretty much forgotten about. There's a hacker girl named Plastic that they give lines of dialogue like she is some kind of autistic 10-year-old, but they animated her body to look like, at the youngest, a 16-year-old, so it just comes off as weird and odd. There's a main character, Noah, and then there are several other characters that should have been Noah, in the sense that they should have just merged multiple characters together instead of keeping them separate. But the main problem is that the actual missions just kind of suck. All the way to the end, I was struggling with the fighting mechanic. I struggled with the fighting mechanic in the original game, but it was even worse here because at least the original game would let you just pick up a gun and shoot people. Not so much the case in Catalyst. There is a disruptor gun that you get fairly early, but they fail to tell you that you actually can use the disruptor gun to... We should actually look at this deck first. They fail to really tell you that the disruptor gun can break cameras permanently in the world. So the number one thing you need to do, you just pretty much have to do it, is do as many races, dashes, delivery options, every kind of mission that's not even a side mission but a second tier side mission in the open world map. Do that as quickly as possible before the bad guys are heavily chasing after you, and you will definitely know when the bad guys start heavily chasing after you, because the cameras will look at you and set off an alarm, and then you'll have this GTA kind of 3-star system in which you have to fight off and then also run away from the police. But do as much as possible there, and use the disruptor as much as possible facing a camera to disrupt and break the cameras. The disruptor looks like it has a 360 view area of influence, but it literally only is what you're looking at. Like, you can be looking downward and it still won't work. So this is going to start later. So now is not really even the time to look at these decks. Or I guess it may be the time to look at these decks and think about it. Clearly they want you to build your own deck, but I don't know if I would care to do that. I guess we could certainly see, if we were gonna create a new deck, what would our options be. Seems like you could probably do Exodia and make a deck that way if you were just gonna be kind of pathetic around it. It does seem like I have enough cards, though. After the massive card pack openings, I wouldn't struggle to make a deck. It would just be a matter of going through kind of a long list of cards and starting to maybe mark some cards as a bookmarked, like, favorite card. And I guess that would be the next step, certainly, is to potentially find some extra time to start looking at spells and traps in particular, and fusion monsters and extra monsters, and see where the spells, traps, and fusion monsters point towards as far as effect monsters and regular monsters. I don't think there's a lot of effect monsters that would uniquely point towards a full strategy, but there are some effect monsters certainly that would have some cool effects that might synergize with a full strategy or idea. But I guess I can't really do anything at the moment, so we'll just play ranked. So just as I'm finishing up Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, because it really is, it's not a game I would even recommend playing at all. Don't ruin your memories of Mirror's Edge 1 by playing Mirror's Edge Catalyst. If you really like Mirror's Edge 1, there is time trials after the game where you could go through the good and the much better made levels of Mirror's Edge 1 to test yourself. That's really all Catalyst is able to offer. There are two online things Catalyst can do. You can make a time trial and upload it, which is just a bunch of, like, points that you need to, rings you need to jump through. Or you can make what they call a beat LE, which is literally just a spot. there doesn't seem to be any actual gameplay related to it at all. It's just like a spot you can go and other people can check in at that spot. But also, it seems like there was a major land grab and there's barely any spot in the entire game where you can put a beat LE, because so many other people have put beat LEs, or it has to be so far away from every other type of content in the game. There's all kinds of ridiculous collectibles that don't matter. Computer chips. So let's see, grid leaks. It's just ridiculous. And the map only opens up at the end of the game to tell you where grid leaks are. It doesn't tell you where any of the computer chips are. So you'd still have to get a map online and just follow it to get all the computer chips and all the documents and all the recordings and all the other things. It's easily over 300 items that are just never put on the map, even at the end of the game. 300 collectibles that are all pointless. The only rewards the game has ever did do for getting collectibles was give you customizations where you'd have to go to EA Origin to customize your character, and there's just no desire to really do that. So yeah, it was awful. But what's even worse awful, and it's just straight up driving me insane, is that Origin for some reason is not allowing just C program files 86/origin to be the folder that you would install games on. And so it was propping up this error at the end, and when I exited it out of the proper executable of Mirror's Edge Catalyst, Origin played a major contributing role in crashing my computer. And not just crashing it and locking it up, like it was locking it up, but then when I'm rebooting, the Windows files are corrupted, and yet I am running like hard drive tools that are telling me my SSD is fine, that it's still in good shape, and it doesn't have any like bad sectors or anything like that. So it seems to me, and honestly I'm probably unfairly blaming Origin in this case, but it seems to me like Origin left a file open, and because the file was opened, that caused corruption on some other files on my NVMe when it locked up. I suspect, and I am really grasping at straws and just being crazy here, I want to blame Origin. I want to blame the fact that in trying to fix my computer from the previous problems, I upgraded the BIOS and it was a bad BIOS install. Because that's where I'm getting led to at the moment, is that there is either like major corruption to my Windows or a virus on my Windows that is just not getting detected, or there was a bad BIOS install when I upgraded trying to fix the other problem. And this is the problem with even trying to fix something, is that you can certainly create other problems around that. But yeah, when I was getting into the BIOS, the settings were feeling wonky, and I changed the setting, and then all of the sudden the text went to Chinese or Asian characters, and just changing a single setting that wasn't the language setting in the BIOS and then having it corrupt like that was a red flag, certainly. So I got a newer version of the BIOS, a non-beta version of the BIOS, and installed that. And so I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I've fixed everything. Fingers crossed is being the major factor here. Otherwise, maybe I should just reinstall Windows and that would be a nightmare. I'd like to buy a bigger NVMe and just install fresh Windows and keep the old one so I can slowly move things over. But I don't know if I can really afford that since finances are just getting worse and worse, not just for me, but for everybody. So yeah, it was a very, very eventful morning this morning, and that is why I'm streaming earlier today, because I want to open myself up to either take a break and maybe do some Lego while also like if I could also specifically have a time slot open to upload videos and maybe reinstall Windows if necessary. That I would probably appreciate being able to do that. But also, yeah, I'm just a little frustrated, and I didn't want to sit around and twiddle my thumbs for potentially 3 hours in frustration. I did, as a side note for this accountability section, also get around to building another one of the bookshelves I need to build, so I have 3 remaining that need to be built, and then that let me move forward down the path of trying to figure out how the LED lighting is going to work. And it seems like it's going to work by me just doing a very standard thing that you would expect to do with LED lighting, which is to buy a diffuser and a metal aluminum channel to install it into. I had hoped that I could have put the LED lightings, just glued them or stuck them to the side of the bookshelf, that because the bookshelves are going to be wedged next to each other with just a little gap, that would project enough light. And if I was to make kind of a sandwich strategy, that may have worked, but it would have been a nightmare. I would have had to have doubled up the LEDs, which I may have to do anyways. But I would have had to have a set pointing directly up and a set pointing directly down, instead of one just being on the side. It's just the angle at which the light hits being blocked is too much. So yeah, instead I'm just gonna kind of do more of a standard thing, it feels like, and have them in channels screwed to the bottom side of each shelf, which it's gonna be an extra cost, certainly, but it'll probably look better. The good news is that the LEDs are bright enough. Even diffused, they still, at least on bright white, look fine, and even not diffused, they look pretty great otherwise. Okay. Oops. Let's see. I could attack these guys, but they won't die. So we might as well just end the turn. I don't know if I really worked on anything else. I haven't gotten around to playing the Pokemon Snap or the Nintendo Switch. So this weekend could also be a weekend for that. It was way of a break, but I also need to just like start playing Ni no Kuni. The problem I suggested that might occur, and is kind of proving itself to be the case, is that we have played Mirror's Edge as a burn-in test, and the only thing I can definitively say is that yes, there have been some problems. They've been slightly different problems from the RAM just straight up short-circuiting. But yeah, it could definitely be a motherboard issue. If it's the motherboard that's sending the wrong signals or depowering the NVMe SSD hard drives, that could lead to corruptions there. One of the things that the BIOS that indicates the BIOS was corrupt, but that BIOS may be corrupt because of a motherboard issue, was the fact that it was failing to verify good BIOS updates, and so I got very lucky to finally figure out a way to get it to verify a updated BIOS. It's a little weird too, because the updated BIOS I installed is the same number as what was already installed. It just doesn't have a letter after it, but the date that it came out is a month later than the beta I had installed before. So yeah, it could be a motherboard issue, it could have been a corrupted BIOS issue, it could have been EA origin, could have been anything really. Can be the SSD, certainly. But yeah, suffice it to say, I'm really frustrated, and yeah, it puts me in this weird situation where the only thing I definitively can say is that I had problems, but they were different problems, whereas what I really needed to happen is to be able to play the 20 to 30 hours of gameplay that it took to beat Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and have absolutely no problems whatsoever. And my concern certainly is the idea, could continue down that path and I could start playing something like Ni no Kuni, and then all of a sudden I could see different problems, and different would probably be better than the same problems, but either way, problems are problems, and that creates a potential nightmare scenario where I'm just never able to really diagnose what the problem is, or never able to figure it out or fix it. Yeah. And that's just not the kind of life I want to have to live with, certainly, or the experience I want to have as far as PC gaming is concerned. Up until this point, for nearly 10 years, I've been fairly heavy into PC gaming and not run into any major problems. I had a power supply die on me, which that might have been something, an indicator of something, certainly, but who knows. I suppose as the last part of this whining, wow, it's been 24 minutes. I should also point out that in the corruption, it somehow messed up uBlock Origin on Chrome. So the files and the extension itself was corrupt. So undoubtedly, there were files open on the SSD that got corrupted. What doesn't make any sense to me is, why does Windows not make those like read-only files? Like, well, why is it even opening those kinds of files for writing? Why doesn't Windows have shadow copies that it makes, a copy on write system? I guess if ZFS worked on Windows and you could really run an Windows 11 on ZFS, that would be really amazing. But frankly, Microsoft should just have a copy on write system where every file is kept and until you run out of hard drive space. But yeah, so uBlock Origin was messed up. It isn't really that much effort to rebuild the blocks on the 4 or 5 main websites I go that had cosmetic filters on them. By default, uBlock Origin's settings still block ads, and Privacy Badger does the same. It was just the cosmetic filters that are custom for my presentation style. So I rebuilt that. But there may be an occasional instance of something extra showing up as far as an ad. So we may have to work around that. This Ascended Soul only works once per turn, so... I can't summon something else. Well, I could summon something else if I cared to. But you know what, we'll just end the game here. Alright, so yeah, I'm not even thinking that I'll try and fix that programming on my macro this weekend. Really just need a break. We may even get up to tier 3 if we get lucky today. We might start to see a case where even more people are playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and thus the ability to get to the higher ranks might get a little easier. Although at a certain point, it doesn't matter if there's 100 or 200 people ahead of you, if that is the right 100 or 200 people that can always beat you because they have better decks or just more skill. In Platinum, once you get to Platinum and once you're really in a ranked mode, whereas most of these other tiers are not actually ranking people with specific numbers, it is going to come down to who has the most money or the most skill, or both. Okay. Guess you start with this because that's probably a pretty useless. Spell. I wonder why I can't use this right now. Oh man, that was stupid. So he banishes that, which then makes me destroy this. Alright, I deserve to lose there. Alright, following Breakpoint's final update, the next Ghost Recon is reportedly not far off, is an article from Video Games Chronicles. And I definitely do want to just burn through all these articles as much as possible. And see, here's a case where I think a cosmetic feature cosmetic filter. It's not what I'm looking for though. I'm looking for the background here. Is there a way I can click on the background and select it? Yeah. So we can get rid of the background a little bit that way. That being said, I either need to zoom out more. Did Video Games Chronicle always look like this? I'd have to go back and look at my own footage to see. I probably did something a bit fancier here. It also seems like it would make a lot of sense that you could get rid of this little triangle on the image, but that might straight up just be a thing that yeah, the background seems to just come back up. Let's go and activate this. Like, ideally, what you would want to be able to do is to get rid of the everything and just make it a pure white experience. But it doesn't seem like there's a way to fix that. So I'm stuck with what this is, which is still not too bad for a quick run over redoing the filters. I can tell you it is miles away from what it normally looks like. And let's just show that off for comparison here. This is what a news article from Video Games Chronicles by default looks like. Just really poorly designed at a 75% zoom. This overruns. And there are more ads being blocked, I'm sure. This whole sidebar, and then another sidebar, and then just sides and sides. It's like they're trying to squeeze everything down to fit on a cell phone, but then they're not really trying to squeeze the footers and all of the rest down that way. And I did not realize that they are apparently in some way affiliated with Eurogamer and Rock Paper Shotgun and VG 24/7. Because Yeah, at a certain point, that probably also highlights the weirdness of trying to get any video game news and all. How much of it is all being written by the same people, or all owned by the same maybe 4 or 5 corporations, which arguably might be better than mainstream news, which is probably owned by at most 4 corporations. We probably had already talked about this. Ubisoft says more of its games will be getting NFTs despite the initial backlash. It makes a lot of sense that they would just continuously double down on that. Like, I really don't see any reason why they wouldn't. I don't know if it's going to really affect me much, but Twitter has changed its API apparently as far as embedded tweets, making it so that if you delete a tweet on Twitter, you an embedded tweet will also delete it, where before that didn't seem to be the case, and now there's kind of an ugly amount of white space if you embedded a tweet. Now, there's a lot of arguments certainly that could be made, and I don't think I've even thought it all the way through as far as the idea of the right to be forgotten. That was something that Europe, the EU, tried to pass laws for and went to a certain extreme to that, but then it didn't seem to really impact too much, really. Unlike the requirement of you clicking accept for cookies all over the place. And at a certain point, the right to be forgotten, in the idea of inventing a new right that wasn't even really in question or something that could have happened, is an interesting idea. But for thousands of years, history has been built around the idea of collecting as much accurate information and maintaining accurate information. And certainly the rich and the powerful have a lot more reason why they would need laws to allow them to try to get people to forget things about them, compared to poor people who will just not have that same opportunity to be forgotten. So my first knee-jerk instinct is that Twitter changing its API so that you could potentially backtrack on a tweet and not be canceled by something you said 5-10 years ago, my knee-jerk reaction certainly is that it's just something that you can't really try and assist people with. Newspapers aren't allowed to just remove from historical sites what they post and pretend like they never said it. They have to put in a retraction. They have to put in an apology. I think that's probably the way the real world has to work for everybody, is that if you say something as an edgelord teenager and you don't believe in it or stand by it anymore, you should just be able to come out and say, I don't stand by that anymore. On the other hand, I also think it's worth pointing out that these news sites, a lot of these online news sites, are at fault for not taking screenshots and converting tweets into actual quotes. Like, it has never been the case that they should have just been linking directly into Twitter so that then somebody else could also comment on a comment they're reporting on. Like, that's not even driving engagement to the news sites. If you embed a tweet and then people decide to respond to that tweet, that's just driving engagement back to Twitter. So it's always been a 100% one-sided benefit to Twitter to allow embedding. Same is true for YouTube embeds. Like, embedding a YouTube video on a video game news site gets more views for YouTube and lets YouTube run more ads, on that video, it does really nothing for the video game news site. The right way to do this would be to make your own local copy, edit it down to fair use, be willing to fight fair use and expand fair use as a concept, and then put it on your own servers and pay for the hosting, which definitely that could be expensive for a video. But for a tweet, it would have been super easy to say, here's a screenshot. Here we've blurred out the names of anybody we're not reporting as on, because we don't feel like doxing people that are just incidentally responding to the same tweet thread. Most of the time when you've seen a picture of a tweet shown, let's face it, the vast majority in the past 10 years have been the news reporting on Donald Trump tweeting something back when he was on Twitter. Like, most of the time when they just showed a picture of that tweet, it looked pretty awful, and it would have made a lot more sense to rewrite that up, make the text bigger, or just quote him as saying, having said something in a publicated site. But that Twitter change may very well have been part of the reason why we've been seeing some cookie prompts on some of the sites. Anyways, let's see. Let's keep on playing. It feels very weird for them to announce a new festival and then not let me play the new festival, so I'm just doing normal ranked play. Speaking of Twitter, Video Games Chronicle says Sony's Bungie's acquisition saw more Twitter discussion than Microsoft Activision's Blizzard deal, which, okay. I already mentioned that. That was something that I am not super surprised by, because Sony announcing the acquisition of Bungie really came out of nowhere, where Microsoft or anybody acquiring Activision Blizzard is not a huge surprise. These are the cookie preference things that I'm talking about, and I have to just kind of assume that they are popping up because of my router blocking ads, and I'll just have to make another cosmetic filter to get rid of them. Remedy apparently is going to actually remake Max Payne 1 and 2 for current gen systems. The game will be released as a single package. Now, remaking is different than just remastering. The games are currently in the concept development stage, suggesting release may be still some time away. Max Payne as a series probably could come back to something. Remedy is the makers of Alan Wake and the other game that was really popular, Control, and they've just had a decent amount of success lately, despite personally I found the Control to be kind of a disappointment of an experience. There is going to be some trouble certainly remaking some of these mid-90s, early 2000s first-person shooters. You can certainly, if you're remaking and not just remastering, bring it to the modern stage, use the Unreal Engine 5, and make good levels and good gameplay. What you're going to trip on is the character of Max Payne, the character of all the other characters. You're going to either have to go the Tomb Raider reboot route and make a very different Lara Croft that's dressed differently, acts differently, and is only really just has the same name as Lara Croft and does similar things. And you probably want to also avoid the Tomb Raider reboot problem of adding bows into gameplay where there wasn't bow and arrow gameplay before. The Max Payne series, having not played it, I kind of assume that it's a lot of staying on the ground, running around mostly flat levels, shooting people, and that may not fly. You may need a lot more running, jumping, wall cover taking experiences for a modern Max Payne. Of course, if a Max Payne remake does succeed well enough for Remedy, which I think maybe Remedy is owned by Microsoft, and that would be part of this, certainly. I guess these will be used. This will be Remedy's in-game engine, in-house engine called Northlight. Same as for Quantum Break. Let's see. It's, I think, worth pointing out too that Remedy's games have tried to be a lot more personable and character related more lately than what I imagine Max Payne was. So they very much could end up making a very different type of character. Yeah, I'm starting to yawn already. I still haven't quite figured out when would be the right time to claim that my insomnia is mostly settled down. A lot of tossing and turning, a lot of sleeping for an hour and then waking up and then going back to sleep again. Okay, according to Wikipedia, oh, and I guess this is another site I should try and clean up. Let's see. Remedy seems to be an independent company still. And it started with Max Payne. Then it had a partnership after the Max Payne series, and then I think it may still have some partnerships or still be on decent terms with Microsoft. We certainly didn't see Control be a PlayStation exclusive or anything like that, I don't think. With this, it definitely does feel like that it doesn't feel like Remedy is going to have too much more that they can lean on, so they're going to have to get Alan Wake to really succeed for them. They're going to have to potentially make a sequel to Control, which is kind of a no-brainer. And they're going to have to hope the Max Payne remake works. Also, they're going to have to hope that they can make something new. What is slightly scary is that they may try to just put Max Payne in the same universe and have all their games in the same universe, and that's going to really paint them in the corner. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I'm just scrolling down this Wikipedia article. Far too much. If we look specifically at the Max Payne article on Wikipedia, we can jump down to reception and awards. Its first month, it sold roughly 82,000 copies. It became the 19th bestseller for 2001, and domestic sales of 300,000 units, and revenue of 13.8 million. So 300,000 units in 2001 seems to be kind of like a lot, whereas in 2022, 3,000 units seems to be the break-even point for a good game, which goes to show either growth or a lack of growth. You can see it's high 80s, almost 90s for PC and Xbox versions, and then considerably worse versions for the ratings for the iOS, Game Boy Advance, and PS2 versions, as far as the reviews are concerned. So yeah, in a lot of ways too, though, announcing that you're going to remake a game like Max Payne gives me a heads up to potentially not spend energy like buying or playing the original Max Payne games. Now I can just wait and see if the reception is good for the remakes and potentially buy the remakes and then play them instead. So it's a new in for new players like me. It also is something that I don't have to really think about or deal with too much until a actual trailer comes out, so I can just sit back and relax as far as the announcement too. Only the major fans of Max Payne's are going to flip out on the announcement that they're going to start working on a remake, which could easily be canceled before it even gets into production state. It's in pre-production now. And often those announcements come after somebody just green lights the idea of something being in pre-production after one meeting. There could be very little time or money spent in pre-production. Moving on, Mario Golf. Man, I cannot talk. Mario Golf is the next Nintendo 64 game coming to the Switch Online, which I think in part is almost out of spite because nobody really liked the new Mario Golf game, and in part I think it probably also just highlights that there is a very small list of Nintendo 64 games in which all the license have been negotiated to bring back and emulate. Like, from Nintendo's perspective, there is probably only a dozen and a half games worth bringing back and emulating, whereas from the fans' perspective, there's probably 2 or 3 dozen games worth bringing back, but a lot of those are going to be tied up into licenses or licensing rights that people aren't going to bother to negotiate, which once again points out that just finding the ROMs online is the better way to do things, because then you can have everything and you don't get spoon-fed things through a subscription service and get a poor quality product during the whole process also. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says 46 of US PlayStation and Nintendo players would consider Xbox Game Pass if it adds Activision titles. Research gauges interest on an Xbox subscription service. Almost certainly the Activision games will show up in the Game Pass. But also, I'd say that's kind of a deceptive article because more than likely 46% of US PlayStation and Nintendo players also have some avenue in which they already have the Xbox Game Pass or could get it. This is hardly 46% of people who exclusively only play on PlayStation or exclusively only play on Nintendo Switch would all of a sudden go out and buy an Xbox Series X or Series S and and then get the Xbox Game Pass on top of that. Let's see. This guy's gonna cancel it, isn't he? Let's see. Gran Turismo 7's big rebalancing update is out. It significantly increases credit payouts. This patch was trying to get players back on the side following them nerfing the rewards and reducing the payout from doing races. It's probably too little too late though. I mean, you've already kind of irritated your player base, and apparently the player base is still willing to play, but they're probably not willing to really support your next game or stick around with this racing game as soon as there's something better to replace it with. Which I think goes to show that it probably would be the perfect time to it probably would be the perfect time right now to release a AAA racing game if somebody had one in their back pocket, but I don't think there's enough competition out there to prove that to be the case. This guy is doing something crazy. Moving on, and major Dying Light 2 update will add a new Game Plus mode in April, plus mini fix for both solo and multiplayer modes. It's a little surprising it even needs a new Game Plus mode, but whatever. There's been very little talk about Dying Light 2 since it's come out. I'm noticing that these new parkour challenges trailer here introduces an interesting idea on my part, because if I were to now go and try and play Dying Light 1, assuming that Dying Light 1 does have some parkour challenges in it, I could definitely make a direct comparison to the parkouring in Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which at a certain level, Mirror's Edge Catalyst did not add any new elements as far as parkouring abilities compared to the first game, with maybe the exception of a grapple rope, which was new in Mirror's Edge Catalyst. But that certainly is not enough nowadays, because there's just so much more that just an average game has as far as movement ability and movement tech that it just doesn't even compare. It would be laughable if somebody were to try to make Mirror's Edge 1 today, even though it was foundational on the improvement of movement technology. It has just evolved so much, and you have games like Dying Light, which is really an RPG game with zombies in it, and just happens to heavily rely on movement tech if you so choose to use it, and I think you pretty much are going to be forced to use some movement technology. Yep. And it really is probably another argument where Mirror's Edge 1 should have just been laid to rest and allowed to do its own thing. I'm seeing my monitor is flickering on the bottom, so I think one of the things I will do is I'm going to replace my third monitor, which is a pretty old monitor anyways, with a different one. I luckily do have a spare one. And then if I start seeing flickering on the spare one, that'll tell me that it's either a video card or the power plug being in a different outlet problem. Although I question whether it's really the power plug being in a different outlet. I am certainly questioning whether I need to go ahead and just start recording footage for October in Halloween month. I probably need to just schedule a little bit more videos to find out if I'm that close. I may be not that close to Halloween month, or I may be. If I was going to play Dying Light 1, it almost doesn't even matter if I start in October, because while that is a zombie game, it's not a particularly scary zombie game, and it's more the kind of game I would play at any point. Moving on, Video Games Critical says the DLC character for WWE 2K22 wrestler. Well, they're bending over backwards to make this related to the video game, but really, the actual article here is just this part. Nash Carter has been released from the WWE following abuse allegation. The wrestler was set to join the game in June, and so now the DLC character is canceled. Which is totally a better way to have written this. Upcoming DLC wrestler Nash Carter canceled following abuse allegations would be a better way to write that. Yeah, there's probably a pretty big history of abuse amongst wrestlers, but they've done a better job of hiding it than most industries, although I imagine that most sports people probably do a good job hiding that also. Now, I want to claim that I talked about this when this was first announced, but maybe I didn't. Miss Pac-Man has been removed from the new Pac-Land re-release due to a dispute. Bandai Namco has been excluding the character from recent titles. I feel like excuse me. I kind of feel like Bandai Namco never really even included Miss Pac-Man in titles. Unless there was a sweet couple of years where everything had been legally, like, graded and fixed. Like, Miss Pac-Man was always something that irked Bandai Namco because it was a character that they never intended to create, they didn't create, and it was, I think, Midway's way of screwing over Bandai Namco, which was probably just Namco at the time, because they hadn't negotiated a license or yeah, there's a whole story behind it, and I'm not sure we ever got the full story, but Bandai Namco never liked Miss Pac-Man. And that's where I would like to claim that when Pac-Land's re-release and any recent Pac-Man games would have been odd to even include her. Let's see. The thing that is even odder to this, or that adds more fuel to the weirdness here, is the fact that I believe the rights to Miss Pac-Man have now been acquired by even a different company. Here's the article. It says Miss Pac-Man was not a Namco creation. It was originally a modded version of the game called Crazy Auto, which was made by a group of programmers at the General Computer Corporation in the United States. Midway, who had the rights to release Pac-Man in North America, wanted to release a sequel, but Namco hadn't provided one, so Midway agreed to buy the rights to Crazy Auto, with the two working together to turn it into Miss Pac-Man. When Namco's licensing deal with Midway was terminated in 1984, reportedly because it didn't authorize the decision to release Miss Pac-Man, the rights to Miss Pac-Man went to Namco. However, GCC had already agreed to a royalty deal with Midway, meaning it would get royalties anytime Miss Pac-Man was used. Although a further royalty deal between Bandai Namco and GCC was made in 2008, there are reportedly some royalty issues that remain unresolved. This is further complicated, and I'm just reading this out loud so that even I get it, that in 2019, At Games, makers of the At Legends arcade control sticks and the At Legends Puck, that is a standalone little console toy for older games more than newer games, which, by the way, my At Legends gamer is gathering dust because I haven't gotten around to it. Like, there's a lot of projects that I've failed to properly continue working on in the past year, and I'm half considering even cannibalizing my server that I was supposed to work on and build a little bit, and taking a hard drive or an SSD out of that to install Windows on a hard drive instead of a NVMe. It really wouldn't work too well if I did that, though. It would be a major step backwards to go from an NVMe like Samsung 970 Evo to a hard drive. Instead, I need to buy just a higher capacity NVMe. Anyways, to continue with the story, in 2019, At Games, a company that specializes in mini retro consoles and handhelds, released a Miss Pac-Man mini arcade cabinet, despite Bandai Namco claiming it never gave it permission to do so. Bandai Namco sued At Games, who 1 week later did a deal with GCC to acquire the Miss Pac-Man royalties interest allegedly owned to it. So this lawsuit, has just been going on for an incredibly long amount of time here. This fight has been going on for a long time. Since then, Bandai Namco seemingly made efforts to ensure Miss Pac-Man doesn't appear in any of its games, so it is to avoid further complicating royalties disputes. The upcoming Pac-Man Museum Plus, which is released on May 27, contains 14 Pac-Man games in one collection, but Miss Pac-Man is notably absent. Pac-Land is a compilation, but presumably Miss Pac-Man once again be replaced with Pac-Mom, which is what they've been doing, is just making a game called Pac-Mom or making a character called Pac-Mom. So, yeah. And the irony there is that Miss Pac-Man is probably the Pac-Man game most people want to play, because it was a mod that made the game better than the original Pac-Man. And in the decade since 1984, they've not done a great job, really, around making Pac-Man relevant and making Pac-Man good. As much as you might poop on Sonic for being a series that has as many bad games as it does have good, if not more, Pac-Man by far is way worse. Championship Edition DX is pretty much the only Pac-Man game of worth note. Maybe Pac-Man 99 on the Switch is good. I didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. But otherwise, before Championship Edition DX, it was always just re-releases of Pac-Man and not really anything of interest. Moving on, Amazon US is offering 3 for the price of 2 on some big name game releases, including Elden Ring, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Tina's Wonderland. That is, apparently there's 100 games available in the promotion, which that is an interesting step in that we might start to see Amazon.com try to target specific sales around specific items more than just having a generic overwhelming Prime Day, because Prime Day is kind of ridiculous in that it is often trying to push you to buy things in categories that you would just never buy anyways. Like, you may be a single guy with no female friends and it would be trying to sell bras to you on Prime Day, amongst just everything else available for sale. So if they tried to, or if they just decided to get in on the idea of having something kind of like a Steam sale every now and then, and actually looked at Valve as a potential competitor for the game market, that might be something of interest. Although there is, I suppose, a question to be asked here, in that you probably are getting a significant amount of physical games on sale instead of going directly through the Amazon Prime launcher, which that would be the other way they would try to do that, I imagine. There, I've lost. Interestingly enough, when I clicked on this link, though, it's not video games that it's showing me. It's showing me many categories, and mostly kids' books. So, yeah, I had to click on the sub-department of video games. I see Breath of the Wild right now is like $39.99 instead of $59.99, which, okay. Does the DLC still have to be bought online for Breath of the Wild, I guess would be the question. Same as Shin Megami Tensei 5 Standard Edition. A lot of these are Switch games. that I'm taking note of more than anything, since I just got a Switch. Also, I guess since these are all console games, that would be the only console where I'd buy games for anyways. Get 3 for the price of 2 definitely means that you're going to pay for the highest price of the 2. This is probably a decent deal if you consider how you're probably not going to get that from GameStop, and that's really the only competition that you would have as far as things that you would check out or see. Yeah, I don't think GameStop has deals where it's buy 2 and get the 3rd for free very often, if ever. You don't have used games, so it might be a better deal to get some games used. It is always a better deal to have friends or family that would share copies of their games once they're done playing than buying yet another copy, or going to a library and renting copies of video games, which most libraries do allow for that and do that. Particularly, I'm in a weird situation where, since I only have a Switch as a console and I'm PC gaming all the way otherwise, it's less of a selection, certainly, to even begin to think about. But that is certainly something to consider. Of course, again, I'm just really, really broke right now. On top of which, like, at any point, I may have to pull a trigger and buy another motherboard. I am leaning more towards motherboard at the moment. Why didn't I put this in attack mode? Well, it didn't work anyways. Moving on. Lego and Epic Games are teaming up to make a metaverse with Lego. They're saying to make the metaverse safe for children. The long-term partnership will create an online space where children can play safely. What would be funny is if this somehow ends up with Lego not even using any of the stud and brick technology and just animating a completely different type of metaverse environment. Of course, the problem with this in any announcement around the metaverse is that the metaverse is just a buzzword that nobody should be using. On top of which, Lego has tried multiple times, or Lego has licensed itself out multiple times for other companies to try to make a Minecraft kind of MMO type experience, and it really has not worked. Lego Worlds was the most recent attempt at that, and that is an awful game. But before that, there was, I think, a Legends of Chima Lego game that didn't really go anywhere, and I believe there was a Lego City game, or Lego City Online game. Meanwhile, I need to probably take a step back and try and remember what games has Epic Games even made. They've made Fortnite, but before Fortnite, what else do they have? I don't think it was really a lot. They've been making Epic Games Engine, certainly, and the Epic engine is good. With the exception of Fortnite, I can pretty much assume that none of the other games that Epic has ever made or released in its entire life were particularly kid-friendly experiences, and arguably Fortnite is barely even kid-friendly as an experience. It allows for kids to play, and it's mostly kids playing Fortnite, but I don't know if I would put it on the same level as a Lego TT game, for instance. Let's see. Can this work for us? We got knocked down a rank playing this here, and probably won't get up 2 ranks again. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the next Epic Game Store titles have been announced. XCOM 2 and Insurmountable will replace Rogue Legacy and Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Rogue Legacy is probably a great one to get if it's still available, considering Rogue Legacy 2 is about to come out. Video Games Chronicle says this year's new Need for Speed game is reportedly now current gen only. It's suggested Criterion has dropped the PS4 and Xbox One versions, which, interesting. I guess with this announcement we probably are at a point where current gen refers to PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles, whereas I was referring to those consoles up until this point as next gen. Here, I'm about to lose. Let's see. Cyberpunk 2077, which includes a free PS5 and Xbox Series X and S upgrade, is on sale today for $5. PS4 and Xbox One versions of the game are going cheap at Best Buy. So that is just a slash and burn sale. Of course, you have to go to Best Buy to get them. Still may not be worth it to really get Cyberpunk 2077. Like, I just don't see what you would do there. It's just rubbernecking at a certain point. You're just trying to look at a car crash. Here's a prescient announcement compared to the Lego Metaverse announcement. Despite a huge investment, Metaverse games are reportedly struggling to retain players. Despite the huge investment, the games are failing to attract an audience. It's kind of hard to attract an audience when there's a lot of questions around the Metaverse or what Metaverse you're talking about. Because do you have to have VR to do a Metaverse thing? Is that a default requirement? Or could you do something that they claim is the Metaverse and just have a screen and maybe a web camera on you? Are they going to try and rebrand every VR thing as a Metaverse thing going forward? That's another question. And while I may be somewhat of an outlier, there is probably a lot of players out like me that either just don't really want to hang out with people when playing video games. Like, I never really had that feeling. Sure, there were a couple times where I'd play video games with friends, but mostly it was a solo experience for me, and I don't want to hang out online with them. I wouldn't want to hang out in a metaverse with them. Sometimes I would talk video games to exhaustion with my friends at school, but if we weren't trapped in a school, we probably would have both chosen to just go home and play games ourselves. I am certainly of an older generation, yeah, that where online games were not really a thing anyway, so it certainly colored what I think of when I think of video games as being first and foremost narrative single-player experiences instead of giant MMO games or online games. But yeah, I don't see how the metaverse appeals to somebody like me. The weird thing, certainly, with all this locking up and problems, though, is that none of it ever happened while I was live streaming. So throughout that whole process, I've been able to live stream perfectly, and I haven't had any hitches or locking up, which I saw lots of hitches and locking up playing Mirror's Edge Catalyst, but I really think it was just Mirror's Edge Catalyst being the problem. But I guess it's not super surprising that you wouldn't have trouble playing a kind of flat Unity game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel compared to a highly demanding graphical game like Mirror's Edge Catalyst, even if Mirror's Edge Catalyst is older. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Activision Blizzard has said that all of its US-based QA testers will become full-time employees. The move follows months of unrest at Warzone's developer Raven. At a certain point, though, they already have fired a lot of the QA testers that they didn't want to keep, and they've already done some anti-union actions. So this is probably a lot closer to an attempt at appeasement so that they please don't unionize. This has also been described by others, and it's an interesting thought certainly, as a potential PR move to allow Microsoft to say, look how much Activision Blizzard has improved already since we announced our intention to acquire them. Please don't stop this acquisition in its tracks, because who knows what'll happen. Like, you can almost assume that Raven would undo the full-time status of the vast majority of the QA testers if the acquisition didn't go through. In a lot of ways, it may be a moot point, because Activision Blizzard itself could end up getting broken up and sold off if the acquisition doesn't go through. Yeah, you really can't put a lot of good faith assumption into any action by Activision Blizzard at the moment, when they're trying to be on their best behavior, when they're desperately trying to avoid unionization from happening, when they're about to be acquired. It's inaccurate to say Microsoft is gung-ho on the idea of unionization in any form, so they more than definitely would prefer no unions to exist. Let's see. This has been turned into a zombie somehow. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says you can watch 85 minutes of eFootball version 1.0.0 gameplay. If you want to check that out, check out the article. I couldn't care. Bungie may be hiring for an animated Destiny show. Oh, speaking of shows, it seems that the Halo TV series is particularly doing poorly as far as its reception, which I don't know if there's really a big surprise around that. But yeah, the Halo series doesn't seem to be too interesting as a standalone TV series, and it doesn't seem to be staying true enough to the Halo lore to really appease the fanboys of Halo or appeal to the fanboys of Halo. And I heard an interesting argument. As somebody who hasn't played Halo 1, the first season of this Halo series is going to be 10-hour long episodes. It takes about that same amount of time to just play Halo 1. So it's probably a lot better for most people who are fans of Halo to just go back and play Halo 1, unless they've already played it to exhaustion already. Bungie may be smarter going with an animated direction. Personally, as a former anime super fan, going in that direction for a wild and crazy sci-fi story like Destiny, which is what I assume it is, probably makes a lot of sense and opens up an easier way to tell that kind of story. If I've lucked out here, I'll be surprised if this works. I'm still yawning quite a bit and going quiet, sorry. Let's see, let's continue our pace and momentum. Returnal won the best game at the BAFTA Games Awards. The game picked up 4 awards in total. The idea of BAFTA giving out game awards is an interesting idea, certainly. At a certain level, I feel like they probably are going to lean towards only British game companies being allowed to win awards, which would create a weird situation in some years when there aren't that many British game developers. But yeah, we know Psychonauts 2 was not made by a British company, but maybe this actress is British. Yeah. At a certain level, I guess the BAFTAs probably should just include everybody, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm not seeing anything here that specifically points out them all to be British game designers. It would be probably a good thing to have more award shows for what they're worth. In the example of the Oscars, if we talk about the controversy around that most recently, if there was a different Oscars of any relevancy that anybody could have even named, where people said, well, forget this, I'm not going to watch the Oscars anymore, I'm going to watch this, the People's Choice Awards or something like that, that would be interesting. Or the Cannes Film Festival or something like that. But there is no competition there, And instead what you have is a situation where it's just a ever-growing apathy in which nobody cares about any award shows, and that probably to some small percentage leads to people not caring at all about art films anyways. Although it may be a chicken and the egg situation, really, where people just don't care about art films anyways, so nobody goes to watch them and nobody cares whether they win awards. There's considerably fewer film buffs out there than what I think there should be. But a lot of people don't like to watch anything other than Marvel movies and Batman movies, and it is a form of entertainment. And I could say almost the exact same thing, is that there should be more fans of point-and-click adventures in video games in 2022. But if that's not what people are attracted to, and that's not how people want to entertain themselves, it's kind of silly to say that it should be different. It probably highlights a factor here in that all art, being subjective, really should have no value. And when you have to integrate a product into art, it makes this awkward compromise that really shouldn't occur. If somebody could make a video game because they were living on something like universal basic income, and they could just do it as their own hobby and then put it out for free, and then the people that like it, and the people that don't, and that was it, that would be great. There would be then, I think, more people and more reason to give out awards for somebody who puts out a game for free. But that's not how games work. That's not how movies work for the most part. You spend millions of dollars making a movie. You have to get it in theaters. You have to get ticket sales. You have to do massive $1 million for your consideration campaigns for the Oscars. The interesting movies that deserve to be talked about get talked about by very few in that situation, in that setup. Moving on, 5 minutes of Multiverses gameplay footage is leaked. Here we have, this is the Warner Brothers crossover fighting game, Smash Brothers clone. And here you have like 5 different skins of not Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo's pal, Shaggy. Which, okay. I mean, a video leaking, whether intentional or not, doesn't really change too much as far as Multiverses. It's going to have a steep uphill battle to climb to pull away whatever fandom still exists when it comes out around Smash Brothers, which I imagine that fandom could be fairly high still. As long as there isn't any real competition, Smash Brothers the most recent Smash Brothers could be a go-to game for years upon years. It's not like there are even other fighting games of note on the Nintendo Switch. So, plus, even if there was a fighting game like Street Fighter or something on the Switch, it would really be playing to a different audience and a different play style. Moving on, Metroid Dread's latest update adds a boss rush modes. Sounds like it is 3 separate variations on a boss rush concept, which is interesting. What's funny is how these updates seem to be designed on the Nintendo Switch. Like, it just feels awkwardly different to have a to have an update prompt pop up on the Switch and then download an update that adds significant amounts of content, whereas an update on an Xbox or PlayStation is probably not going to add any content at all, and if it does add some content, it's going to be very minimal. Unfortunately, almost certainly the next Switch, the Switch 2, will have a lot better online services, and we will see updates being sold as DLC instead of being free updates. Unless Nintendo can carve out some kind of niche where owning the Nintendo Online Pass just guarantees you updates to games, and not owning the pass doesn't guarantee you updates to games. In a lot of ways, though, the Switch right now has to compete by adding real content for free, because it is the oldest console out there at the moment, and it doesn't have that big of a library. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says GameStop is reportedly canceling the Amico pre-orders at Intellivision's request, which is once again more evidence that the Intellivision Amico is never going to be delivered. I don't know how many people were buying it other than for a meme anyways, but clearly some people were getting tricked into pre-ordering it. And GameStop probably pushed pre-orders on it as much as they push pre-orders for anything else. Here's the other shoe dropping, certainly, from Video Games Chronicles. The unionizers at the Call of Duty studio Raven are excluded from the Activision QA's pay raise, quote, due to legal obligations under the National Labor Relations Act. There's no legal obligation whatsoever not to underpay or not give a raise to people. That is a lie, straight up. So basically they're giving a raise up to a minimum of $20 per hour to everybody who didn't unionize. It's straight up a bribe. Yeah. Yeah, this is just a straight up lie, and this really goes to show that even Bloomberg, in putting out articles, will print just whatever some Activision Blizzard spokesman says without challenging it. Without challenging it at all. See, PC Gamer says the National Labor Relations Act doesn't allow employers to confer benefits on employees during a union organizing campaign to induce employees to vote against the union. End quote. Wow. Oddly, maybe there is a law here. How backwards is capitalism in the United States that there can be a law that says you cannot give a raise to people? Although it kind of makes sense too. But just seems ridiculous. And at the end of the day, if the union succeeds in unionizing, they are going to 100% start negotiating for better than minimum $20 an hour for a QA job and way more benefits. So it's probably not going to benefit Activision Blizzard in the long road to have done this pay raise just to potentially squash a unionization effort. That being said, it still is a good PR move for Activision Blizzard as it's trying to be acquired. So this must just be a union busting move I've never heard of or thought about, to give raises to everybody who aren't unionizing, so that then people, when they say, yeah, actually let's not unionize and let's just take that $20 raise, or let's just assume we'll get that $20 raise as soon as we stop unionizing, which is kind of a huge assumption. But union members in general, the people that vote whether to strike or to continue to form a union, are made up of people, and often those people aren't that smart or that educated into the complicated Machiavellian moves that can be made around union busting and unionization in general. So I wouldn't be surprised if people are upset at the wrong people because of that. Like, there's been lots of cases where people have gotten upset at unions because of something that really was done by a company and the management of a company, and they just skillfully made it look like the union was at fault. And there have definitely been cases where unions, organizers, and unions in general have just done a bad job and have done the wrong thing. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says the Sonic movie director says he'd love to make a Smash Brothers movie. That would be a nightmare, certainly. It's a whole different kettle of fish to have to negotiate the licenses of all of these games, even if the vast majority of them are Nintendo characters. So if you were going to make a Smash Brothers movie, and since it was only going to be like 2 hours, just have Nintendo characters and exclude Final Fantasy characters and exclude who else would you probably exclude? Icarus, probably, just because of a lack of him being popular, and King K. Rool. Maybe he's owned by Rare, but I doubt it. Yeah, you could make a Smash Brothers movie. Of course, it runs into the next problem of what the heck is that movie going to look like. There's a difference between taking one beloved character and making a movie around him in the Sonic movie, which really, I don't think the Sonic movies that have come out have really too much to do with the gameplay and the mechanics of Sonic, other than he goes fast. But that, the only thing you really have going for you in Smash Brothers is to have recognizable Nintendo characters, for the most part, beating each other up, which is probably not what Nintendo would ever want, and it would be potentially too violent, and it's not an interesting story or movie to make. Like, even when you think about the Street Fighter anime from decades previous, like, or the live action remake of Street Fighter, even, like, those are movies that they had to bend over backwards to put story into, so you actually had a movie. Moving on, Xbox's spring sale is now live. It's featuring savings of up to 80%. The online promotion is available until April 21st. And so, I assume there's pretty much no way to buy physical copies of these games. So Amazon is not really competing against Steam or GameStop at the moment with its 2-to-1 sale. It's actually competing against Microsoft and Xbox Game Pass sale. Which, okay, that makes sense. They are pretty much direct competitors. Moving on, Halo Infinite Season 2, Lone Wolves, has been dated with a new trailer. The delayed season of content will launch in early May. Which, the fact that it's seasonal in the first place just seems weird. Yeah, and wrong. And that brings us to our Gematsu articles, and I think for the most part the Gematsu articles have been fixed with the artistic stuff. Let's see. I took that off. No. I want to see if I can get this little red line there. Nope. Doesn't seem like I can get this little red underline to go away, which is fine on Gematsu. Like, ideally, I'd want to strip out any extra excessive visuals on these articles, just because I have so many tabs that are open in the first place. It saves me a little bit of bandwidth and a little bit of video RAM, but also more realistically it just tries to unify different articles in general. So Brigadine, The Legend of Runesaria is coming to PC on May 11th according to Gematsu. All my other plugins I don't think have too much storage or open files, so like this blurred out plugin seems to still be working. I was going to leave this here as far as this game info, company profile and such on Gematsu. I was blocking that before, but I think it might be more helpful to not block that content since it is relevant. And I don't want to go crazy overboard blocking content. Anyways, we're blocking visual elements. Let's see. Most of these articles are from the 4th, so we'd already talked about the Made in Abyss trailer, Miss Kobayashi. Yeah, I'm still not really sure why this messes up like this and goes back so far, but it definitely does. Like, I have a bad line of code, and then my backup code is kicking in, so it's opening about 50 tabs each time because that's the maximum I programmed into it. But it's never reaching the point where it should end early once it realizes that I've already it's hit that point where it's seen an article talked about. It's probably something as small as a single letter or word. And honestly, it may take me 5 minutes to fix it if I just would spend the time on it. I can't help but admit, I just feel so drawn in so many different directions. I've backburnered so many projects. I feel like I haven't finished, and I've kind of abandoned a couple. And I've just got so much that I've personally put on my plate. It's dragging me in so many different directions. And the funny thing is, if you were to take a vacation, as a sense, and just not deal with anything. Coming back after not dealing with anything for a week, I would just still be in the same situation. Yeah. And some of this definitely is my own fault, because I've actively been watching more Netflix and more TV. And once I introduced 2 or 3 hours a day, which is probably not too off of an estimate, maybe it's a little high, of watching Netflix and TV, I've exhausted 2 or 3 hours that I was using to do other things. Of course, I really wouldn't know what to do with myself otherwise if I had everything finished, every project I ever thought of, ever wanted to do, if I just perfectly fixed anything, if I wasn't having computer problems. Yeah, I don't know what I would do with myself if I had free time, really, as it were. I could have, obviously, a massive amount of free time if I wasn't playing video games and trying to make a career out of being a video game YouTuber. But, yeah. That's about it. I probably do know what I would do. I would be bored out of my mind and slightly depressed if I had free time. Like, because back when I was just not playing video games, that's exactly what I was doing, is just kind of laying around watching TV, doing nothing. Sometimes not even that much. Moving on. Let's see, we have Focus Entertainment to publish a puzzle adventure game called Chance of Simnar. We already talked about that too. Liberated Enhanced Edition coming to the PS4, Xbox One on April 20th. Previously I was also blocking out this red line, but visually it's actually better to leave it. THQ Nordic has its showcase set for August 12th. Yuri Killed the Culmination Games has a story trailer. I think we watched that. This was that weird page in which they just did not embed the graphics, the video, right? And apparently they never figured out that they did it wrong, or they did embed it and it's being blocked by something weird. Let's see if we can summon. Well, this isn't going to save me. Unless this just convinces him to give up. We already talked about Dune Spice Wars launching in early access on April 26th. 2 Point Campus being delayed. Swordship launches in September for basically everything. This might be a new article. Is it a shoot 'em up game? By the looks of it, it is. Yeah. I really do need to move the accountability section, just completely stop talking about it, or move it to the end of these streams so I actually can get through the more important stuff, I think, in my opinion, although it's questionable whether any of it's important. A game called Swords of Madness launches May 11th for basically everything. It's currently in early access. It's a side-scrolling roguelike action RPG. Definitely kind of has a half Diablo, half Metroidvania feel to it. I can't tell for certain that the blurring feature is working. I think it is. Yeah. It does look like that might be slightly interesting, but it would need some reviews, certainly. I have no reason to stop playing. There is, I suppose, a thought that could be had of just playing a game, taking a break, coming back and talking for a while, and then playing a game again. Gigapocalypse is coming to PS4, Xbox One, and Switch on June 2nd. It's currently available for PC. This is one of those kaiju games. Is this particularly one of the good kaiju games? Let's check it out. It's Steam page. Yeah, it's rated very positively. So I think we can go ahead and put this on the wish list. Although of all the kaiju games, I will say this one does look to be about the least interesting of the kaiju games I've seen. Feels like it's probably too much of a casual game for its own good. We had already talked about Max Payne remake project being announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I guess we hadn't talked about what consoles they'd announced it for. Ritual Monster. And play. See if he has any more Ash Blossoms. Cancel actions. Go ahead and destroy one card on the field. So you destroy this one that's face down. Then you destroy this one that's face up. And that one seemingly can't be destroyed, so we're running out of choices. See, we had already talked about the Mario Golf being added April 15th. Pocky and Rocky Reshrined, game modes, and new system trailer is available if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Boy, is that a lot of cleavage. That's it. The way you animate that certainly allows for a lot more cleavage from the camera angle to the curves. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai, the Hinokami Chronicles have paid DLC character packs being announced. I feel like the Hinokami Chronicles is kind of a sequel to the original Demon Slayer. Like, the original Demon Slayer game anime is on Netflix, and is one amongst many animes I should sit down and watch. But the Hinokami Chronicles seems to be a quick follow-up to the successful original series, and does seem to have moved the story forward a little bit. My slight concern certainly would be that Demon Slayer might go the route of something like Bleach or Dragon Ball that just goes on forever. There's nothing super wrong with going in that direction and just entertaining people for years upon years, but very often animes just get canceled and then there is no proper ending. Bleach kind of had a pretty pathetic ending for all its filler arcs, and Dragon Ball Z is, last I heard, pretty much still going. Well, not really Dragon Ball Z, but the same characters from Dragon Ball Z are still having stories told about them in Dragon Ball Kai, or whatever it's called now. GTX. Something. Moving on, The Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai 2 Crimson Sin has a teaser trailer, first details, and screenshots. So, check that out, I guess, if you're interested. This definitely looks like yet another JRPG game set in kind of a more modern time where they just happen to have swords. It's interesting that there's never really any stories in the West of something like that. You never have it set in modern time, but people still carry around swords or shields or weapons of any sense. We don't even have a lot of cases where a Western story is kind of in modern times, but everybody has guns on their belts like in the Old West. Yeah, you probably could tell a better, more interesting story if that were the case, if everybody was packing. Moving on, Gran Turismo 7 version 1.11 update is now available, and there's a lot of description here telling you what is changed in that update if you want to check that out on Komatsu. Immortal Life for PC has launched in early access on April 28th. This looks like it is a Stardew Valley type clone game. A game called Demon Gaze Extra has been rated for PC in Korea, and from the looks of it, it kind of feels like it's a dungeon crawler, maybe for PlayStation with these prompts. It definitely looks like it might have some lewd characters and imagery. Also, this might be one of those games that gets an English translation and then you would have to import it in the West because they don't bother to actually sell it in the West. Or this might be another game that is oddly released for the PlayStation 4 but not the PlayStation 5, or oddly gets released in a censored PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 4 version and a uncensored Switch version. Yeah, we'll just have to wait to hear more on that. They have the updated Famitsu sales. Komatsu does. Let's see what's new. Rushana Senkai from Idea Factory takes the 15th spot as new, barely selling 3,000 units, and that is it. Everything else is pretty much old. Kirby selling another 100,000 this week. Mario Kart selling another 20,000. Big difference there. But the overall sales, lifetime sales, are fairly different. So yeah, it doesn't feel like it was particularly a big week for new games in Japan. Let's see, Legend of Heroes Kuro no Kisekai 2 has 2 minutes of battle gameplay if you want to watch that. So they're trying to hype that up quite a bit. Let's take a moment here. This is probably a good point. What I could do is I could go through all of the news from like Video Games Chronicles then take a break and just cover some of the Gematsu articles, and then get back to playing after the Gematsu articles, and yeah, maybe the order there would make a little bit more sense. What wouldn't probably make a lot more sense is if I had the What's on Steam games and I talked about them at the beginning more. Yeah, I can't do any of these campaign things right now, so literally the only thing right now to do would be to either try and grind up through these lifetime unlimited missions, or play solo mode, which we can double check solo mode and see if there's anything new here. I don't think there's anything newer than the Herald's Guidance, but then there's a gate here, so it might be that I have to beat this to unlock more single player stuff. So I really should do something special and do the single player stuff and check out to make sure that there isn't 3 or 4 extra solo sections. And of course we can come over here and receive 14 more levels of the Duel Pass, which is barely giving you anything. Moving on with the news. Gematsu says Vampire the Masquerade Swan Song, The Night Has Come pre-order trailer is now available if you want to check that out. Every time I see this game mentioned, I lose a little bit more faith in it having a chance of being good. Honestly, I just feel like the Vampire the Masquerade series is just never going to succeed. Rogue Legacy 2 launches April 28th for the Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC. This roguelite game is going to exit early access after nearly 2 years. It's been a really long time that it's been in early access. And honestly, unless they put in a whole bunch of new stuff in the 1.0 version of the game, I really question whether there will be as much excitement around it as there should be. Also, I think it's worth pointing out that this animation style definitely feels different from what the first Rogue Legacy was. Like, this teaser trailer seems like you're going to potentially see ghosts and like echoes of other players or other runs and fighting people. And we can see there's new types of attacks, new types of hero classes. Seems like it's going to get a little bit crazier. But honestly, it's very possible that Rogue Legacy 2 is just going to be more of the same, or feel very much like Rogue Legacy 1. And since I played Rogue Legacy 1 relatively recently, I may not quite be at the point where I really would itch to play Rogue Legacy 2. Let's see, Square Enix has trademarked Tactics Ogre Reborn in Japan, which I assume would be apparently there's an Ogre Battle strategy RPG series that has been going since 1993 and the latest one was 2010. Yeah, I imagine Square Enix would copyright pretty much anything though, or trademark anything to maintain trademarks and speculate around making more Japanese games. I wonder if inside of Square Enix there's a lot of dissatisfaction around the Japanese games like Final Fantasy II, and the push for making something like Tactics Ogre is a way in which they could try and save face and make better sales on Japanese products while still totally being jerks to any Western developer that they work with, and saying, oh, they don't like the sales for Tomb Raider, they don't like the sales for Hitman. A lot of it is probably just really bad management too. Apparently an anime-inspired roguelite deck builder called Super Bullet Break has been announced for the PS4, Switch, and PC. I don't know what a roguelite deck builder is for 100% certain. I guess that means you do a run, and as you do the run you get cards that build your deck. Looking at this, you've got some anime girls, younger anime girls, and fairies. And so I guess these chibi fairy versions are probably people you're actually controlling. You can see there's a Switch here and a PlayStation controller and a mobile phone, so that's probably what they're going to try and target. It frankly looks a lot like a gacha game. And so that they may just be trying to avoid actually calling it that. In a weird way, it is going to be bullets, so it is a competitor to something like Project Nikkei from Shift Up, which is also a gun-based kind of gacha game. Although the difference is the Project Nikkei anime waifus are going to be a little less cutesy than this is. Yep. It'll be interesting to see what kind of microtransactions would be in a game like this for those types of consoles. It would be interesting to see if this comes to the West. It already has Steam page, which Steam also was one of the ones that I needed to close things on, and as far as the uBlock Origin visuals, there's not a lot that's blocked on Steam though, as far as visuals. See, the price would be part of the killer too. It seems like it is going to be single player only, which may be a limiting factor here. I wouldn't be surprised if this really is a game that they just put out. It has, say, 160 characters. The girls are calling bullets. And then that is it. And then they never bother to put any more content out. Or they try to sell it as standalone DLC, or they start adding microtransactions. That's the only way a game like this really would continue to survive, is if it just constantly had new content. I could see myself in a very silly mood buying this and just showing it off and doing one run on it, but it'd have to be pretty cheap if that's all I was going to do, is just kind of spotlight a single run in this game. But without a constant player versus player aspect or constant upgrade aspect, there's not a lot of reason why you would play this that much. Moving on, Madison launches June 24th for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, and PC. Later in the summer for Switch. Madison looks like it is a horror game from the looks of it. Do we really have time to to this. What's funny is a lot of trailers do come out and say they're in for mature, or the game they're in for mature, but then when the games come out, they never really quite feel like they're that mature of games. Maybe my mature probably is more mature than the average person's mature, but it's not like there's an NC-17, and it's not like anybody uses the adults only ratings for video games. So, like, a lot of games feel like they would be PG-13 and they're rated in for mature for not the greatest of reasons. Moving on, Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2 is coming to PC, quote, soon. Okay, well, when it comes out, I'll consider it. At that point, that's non-news. Story of Seasons Pioneers of All of Town is coming to the PS4 on July 28th in Japan. I'm just going through everything in order here. The Metroid Dread version 2.1.0 update is now available. It adds Boss Rush, Survival Rush, and Dread Rush modes, which are different rushes, as it were. Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 DLC character Goku Ultra Instinct Sign has been announced. Which Ultra Instinct Sign, I have no idea what that's even about. Demon Gaze Extra is coming to PC on April 26th. It'll be available at a 10% off launch discount until May 2nd. What kind of game is this? Visual novel? Dungeon crawler? Looks like it's a dungeon crawler. How come this one is way blurrier than this one? Interesting. Yeah, they're calling it a turn-based RPG. Yeah, Demon Gaze Extra does not look particularly interesting. And then Story of Seasons Pioneers of All of Town for PS4 is coming to the West this summer. Is the last article we have from Gamatsu. And that's going to leave us with the games that came out. You know what I think I want to do is anytime there's live broadcasting. Well, actually, before I even do that, let's just click this button. Change broadcast settings. And then come over here. Hide all live broadcasts on the stores page. It's already checked. Hide items on my wish list. It's apparently something I could also do. What's funny is there's a checkbox on that setting that says view example products for adult only sexual content. And okay, I guess it just brings up a random selection of adult only games. Although it's including like Kokatsu Party, and I don't know if that particularly is a particularly explicit adult game. What that didn't do, however, is anything for the live broadcast, so I do need to just block this. Store Cloudflare. I don't know what happened to uBlock Origin that immediately wants to get rid of the pictures first, when obviously I want to get rid of the HTML elements first. Okay, we have a game here called Demio, which can I, if I scroll down just a little bit, would I get to the follow list? No, I think you might as well just leave it at that. Like if I get rid of this 100 pixels or so, it probably would only show the top half of this. So yeah, I'll put Demio on the follow list. There's definitely a possibility that it would leave fairly quickly. Right now it's early access, it's $29.99, and so it needs some more time. Best forklift operator. Honestly, I'd like to use a forklift in the real world, and probably would crash it and cause thousands of dollars of damage, if not more. I don't see any reason why I would want to do that in a video game world, because effectively all you're doing is simulating doing someone's job, not really doing something entertaining. And I've been fairly consistent in saying games that simulate a job are not games, or not games I want to play at least. Circle Empire's Tactics is a tower defense game from the looks of it. Yep. And if I reload this page, yep, the live broadcast goes away. I definitely would live broadcast on Steam if I had made a game. It clearly is something extra you can add to your game, and probably something you should do anyways in making a game. Let's see, Waves Running Simulator. Looks like it's just an infinite runner. It's a little bit different looking, but not that interesting, so we can say no to that. Boss Turbo Demo looks like a troll game, and it's free to play, so we can say no to that. We don't even have that many games today. Monster in the Dark Remaster, obviously it's just a horror asset flip game. It looks like it might be a Russian game too. We can say no to that. Radon Break. It's just a side-scrolling Arkanoid, which surprisingly we haven't seen that before. Not that I can recall, at least. In a lot of ways this makes sense, because most screens are going to be widescreen, and when you were playing Arkanoid in the first place, is that the widescreens were rotated 90 degrees upward. Arguably that also says every shoot 'em up game should be a side-scroll shooter instead. I still don't think there's a real value in playing an Arkanoid clone, since it's such a simplistic game. We have Wild West Gringos, and not only is Gringo probably an insult word, I also think the insult word is supposed to be applied to Mexican people, so somebody with a red beard probably is not from Mexico. Regardless of that, the game looks like garbage, so it can be dismissed just on those grounds. Yeah, we have a game called The Game of Unknown, which also looks like garbage. We can quickly dismiss. Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers Edition, now hitting 46%. Let's look at these reviews. We've got a little bit of time. Makes a sense. Figure out what's going on here. Runs like butt. Great game, lackluster port at release. How can you do this? Chrono Cross Square Enix. Really don't have anything to say. In my opinion, you're still better off playing the game on an emulator. This version feels much more sluggish. The updated character portraits look nice, I guess, but the background filter is atrocious. Once again, emulators do it better. Atrocious frame rate, broken polygons on new graphic style, screen tearing, ugly AI, upscaled backgrounds. Yeah, I guess it has been Square Enix in particular that has been trying to very cheaply update their mid-tier nostalgic games. Like looking at every screenshot here, it does look pretty awful as a game. So I don't know why you even fix the graphics at that point, and maybe you just let an emulator run the original game. Or you actually put the effort into it and you actually make a new remake of the game. That would be the better move. Part of the question certainly is how many of these JRPGs are even really worth playing. Like, if I was in charge of Square Enix, I would definitely put it to the creators, to the developers, to say, just make an abridged version of this game. Tell us the same story, but tell us it in 10 hours instead of 200. I'd really like to see even Japanese fans come back and say they stripped out all the gameplay and all the grind and made a worse experience. You just don't benefit now, if you're going to make a remake, to make it as grindy as the original game was. And honestly, if you just stripped out the grind, doubled the XP, tripled the XP, quadrupled the XP, 10 times the XP in a game, and then had an emulator otherwise, at least that would be a different experience. And they kind of did that with the remake of Final Fantasy to a certain level, but they weren't really even willing to commit to that. So here we have a game called Child of Lothian, and they're calling it an exploration immersive sim game. It really feels like you're just flying around trying to keep your eyes on this character who's sneaking around. It's free, it's English, allegedly it has full audio. I guess if it looks interesting to you, check it out. It is a different idea, certainly, to have it set in an 18th century Edinburgh. But I don't know if there's really much of a game here that actually happened. You can actually play with. Here we have a game called Forgive Me Father, which looks like it's a Lovecraftian first-person shooter, all as something like Duke Nukem, or at a certain level, I think I probably could get into the idea of playing Duke Nukem and modern takes on something like Duke Nukem. But again, it would probably have to be pretty short. Like, this is a game that right now, I would, if I was to get it, if someone gifted it to me, I'd probably spotlight it for Halloween month, and that's as much as I'd ever play. Whereas if I really found the extra time and just like decided not to go towards visual novels or fighting games or RPGs, I could see myself potentially trying to play these kind of first-person shooter games. This game is already on the fall list, so I guess the question would come down to it's rated very positively. It's not in early access. I guess that goes on to the wish list in that case. I don't know if I'd ever really want to do Lovecraftian. at a certain point, there are enough Lovecraftian games where you could have a special month one year just playing Lovecraftian themed games. Here we have a game called Chinatown Detective Agency, which feels like it's mostly a point and click adventure. I'm a sucker for those, so I'll put that on the fall list. Although at $24.99, that's pretty expensive. It says it has full English audio, which that helps in point and clicks. Here we have a game called Nature's Habitat, which does not seem like much of a game. So I think I'm going to have to say no to that. I'm surprised so many people even like Mirror's Edge Catalyst here. Should just click on this to see what the percentage is. 83%, 81%. I am shocked by how many people played that. I have 200 hours in record here. Like, the all-time peak apparently of people online though was only 1,400 as far as Mirror's Edge Catalyst. And what is this? That's a runner's kit bundle that's ignored because it's not needed. Yeah, Mirror's Edge Catalyst was supposed to be a online game, and it never even had 1,500 people online at the same time. And yeah, I want to point this out. This is the scene where somebody else steals the data and Faith just steals it from the people trying to get back their own data, Kruger. In fact, I can say almost all these cutscenes are the entirety of what you see in the game as far as cutscenes, and there's nothing else really, nothing extra. This whole trailer there is the vast majority of it. You never get a zoomed in eye like this for that tattoo. You don't get the arm tattoo that you can see here until the very end of the game, post credits. You have to fight these Sentinel security guards far too often, which is, you only fight them about 5 times, but every single time they're pretty awful that you do fight them. And the rest of the security guard isn't much better. Yeah, I am shocked at it being that well reviewed. That being said, this also came out in 2016, so playing it now in 2022, yeah, 8 years later, a lot has changed, and for the better. Generally, games have gotten a lot better than 2016. Arguably, even the original Mirror's Edge, though, there needed to have been a lot more improvement for Catalyst compared to the original Mirror's Edge. Here we have Godfall Ultimate Edition. Yeah, I'm gonna have to be careful not to rehash my complaints about Mirror's Edge Catalyst. I also need to be careful about just complaining about games in general. With the slight exception of Binding of Isaac Rebirth, I haven't played too many games lately that I was super thrilled with. Is this a game you can play single player? Yes. It's $29.99. I'm going to put this on the fall list and think about it some more. It'd be kind of hard to say yes to this game, but I could potentially get into it. Are You Smarter Than the Crowd is already mixed, and this is almost certainly an online PvP game. These kind of games only make sense if they have a big audience, and their all-time peak here so far has been 27 with nobody online, which, unless those numbers go really high, a game like this won't be playable at all. Here we have a game called Card Girl Army, which does not look too different from that other game. This might very well just be a clone of that. Single player only. Looks like it's probably a Chinese game, if I was to guess. Yeah, from the developer, Chinese name. I'll leave this on the fault list. No reason to eliminate. Pet Vet 3D Animal Hospital. Looks like a very old game or a cell phone port done very poorly. Oh, I hate it that these girls' games are so awful. And they're claiming it has great 3D graphics and animation. Who are you kidding? Yeah, one of these days somebody's gonna put the money into making good girl games and they're gonna blow the entire genre out of the water. Although maybe not, because maybe girls just don't want to play games that are girlish and they just want to play good games like everybody else. That may be the case too. Power and Revolution 2022 edition looks kind of like a mess of a 4X game, real-time strategy game. Far too many varied visuals for its own good. $49.99 too is pretty expensive. Yep, I'm gonna say no to that. Screeps Arena looks like an uninteresting game, so I'm gonna say nope to that. Furry Shakespeare. In general, I'm gonna say no to any furry Shakespeare games going forward, and I have been saying no to all of them so far. Catharsis looks like a dungeon crawler. Looks kind of nicely polished for what it is, but not particularly special enough to interest me. Free to play, English only. It's kind of shocking you don't see indie developers or students try to make free, cheap dungeon crawler games. It's probably because it doesn't really show off your skill that well. A dungeon crawler project is probably something you would do first or second year in programming a game, not third or fourth year in college of programming games. And very possibly it's a project that you would never do because it doesn't relate to the vast majority of games that you would be hired to create. This game, Madman, looks like another horror asset flip game. The only thing I will say though is that at least there's a screenshot that actually shows off the visuals of the bad guy, whereas very often you don't get that. So it's a step above, and I'll give it a follow for that reason alone. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not much of a game here though. Still, Apocalypse Floodgates looks like it's a zombie shooter where the character is standing slightly to the left, and anytime I see that, that feels like the people just don't know what they're really doing. Like, I just can't imagine myself ever really wanting to play a game where the character is so far off center. Yeah, otherwise though, this does just kind of feel like an asset flip zombie game. I think I'm gonna just skip it. In fairness though, I don't know what a zombie shooter game could do to make me actually interested in it. Next we have Survival Sisters 2048, which I guess this is a 2048 game with nuns and zombies. Well, that is slightly different as far as a 2048 game. I don't know if that's $5.99 worth of difference. The zombies eat your progress. when they appear, so there must be some way to get rid of the zombies. What's funny is there's actually a better 2048 game here than I've seen, and yet I still don't think I can justify really putting it on the wish list. I'll give it a follow, but the price needs to really drop down to about 69 cents before I could actually consider it. Tower Words here. Looks like it's a Tetris with spelling. It's probably too much. That'd probably overwhelm me. It's $1.39. Otherwise, it just does kind of look like a single screen Unity game. Not particularly interested in it. 79 Pompeii. Looks like an incredibly old game. I would have to say thank goodness that we haven't had any like ZX Spectrum style games that have tried to been sold and ported to Steam. At some point we will have games that look like this that are games that came out decades previous, but at some point they should be just public domain. They shouldn't be ZX Spectrum. They shouldn't be resold, as it were. Although I guess if a game was technically public domain, there might not be anything stopping people from selling a copy of it on Steam, unless Valve specifically says you can't sell public domain things, you can only sell copyrighted things. I guess that would be an interesting experiment. Certainly we don't have any real video games that would have fallen into public domain yet. Silver Axe the Honest Elf. Might be something to this, so I'll give this a follow. Yeah. Digitizer looks like it's an asset flip game. Seems to have shooting and racing in it, which sounds to be way too ambitious for this level of graphics and way too expensive at $24.99. Lollipop Night looks like an asset flip game where you have a lollipop as a weapon, which seems kind of ridiculous. It's a challenge jumping game where you have to overcome various obstacles and traps. Yeah, it would be a bit inflammatory to say it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are some of these low effort asset flip or core games that have more movement mechanics than Mirror's Edge Catalyst did. Yeah, this of course looks like garbage, so we'll move forward. Animation Studio Manager is just a manager simulator. Nothing there visually appealing either. Game Dog seems to be a collection of black and white Game Boy style games, but at an odd resolution and not particularly actual games that would have been for the Game Boy. Yeah, I don't see anything there of interest. Refactory is a Factorio clone, it looks like. $9.59 English and Russian. Lure looks like a low polygon horror game of no real interest. It's free, I guess. And it's English, which is funny because it really looks like more of a Japanese game. So I would have expected it to support some Asian language. Here we have a Chinese game that looks like it's probably a tablet cell phone port. English not supported, free, with MMO online co-op for free, also Chinese only. Living Island Project, looks like a visual novel, and honestly at this point I think we are just going to kind of see this as a Chinese visual novel. I think we're going to just see fewer anime girl style Japanese games in general, and they are going to just come out at random occurrences in the same way that every other game comes out at random occurrence. I don't think we're going to see either this Friday or next Friday or this weekend or next weekend a bunch of adult games all being bundled together and released over the weekends, which at a certain level, games releasing on Tuesday is not even really the way things are getting released anymore. It's like, really, games are getting released on Friday, and sometimes if you pre-ordered you'll get it on Tuesday early, but that's where it is kind of boiling down to. This airborne motocross game. Is this a single player game? It is. Yeah, I'll give it a follow. So we may just be in a new era of adult games coming out whenever on Steam. Well, we'll have to wait and see, give it a couple more weeks and see how it goes. It definitely seems like in that same era, though, we are also seeing just fewer adult games from Japan, and I can't just immediately assume that that is all because of the pandemic. The shoot ball arena, arguably, if it was more polished, would make some sense as far as making a game like that instead of Rocket League. I'm really shocked at how bad Rocket League really played in my hands playing on the Switch. Maybe it'll play a lot better on the PC version if I ever get around to playing it. But we have Unlock Kimono Cuties, and these are like asset flipped 3D models, more realistic 3D models of girls. But noticeably, this girl here is not wearing a kimono at all. This is, I believe, what they call the Virgin Killer outfit, in which they wear what would be a fairly low-cut V-neck sweater backwards, and it covers up all of the front and then barely covers the butt crack, the top of the butt crack of the person. This lady here, which doesn't even particular occasion, is also not wearing a kimono. This lady, all of these are extremely zoomed out also, which shows that the graphics can't be that good, is wearing a kimono. So it's not even accurately describing what you would do in this game. One would hope if we're going to see fewer adult games, we would see fewer garbage games that are trying to appeal to an adult crowd, which obviously this game is. But if they're going to do any kind of curation or censorship, they kind of need to admit that's what they're doing, and be more apparent and obvious about it, and not do it in secret behind. Here we have Hidden Farm top-down 3D, which I assume is just kind of a hidden object game. Maybe not. Maybe it's a farming simulator game. Either way, it looks like garbage. We have about 5 new games. And see, this one is tagged as having sexual content and nudity. So here you have a lot of cleavage on that screenshot, and then here you have a screenshot that Shows the actual gameplay, which is, I assume, tilting the world to make a ball roll to a circle. Then you have a CG image here that's not really even showing anything, and a CG image here that's not really showing anything, and then more tilting gameplay, another CG image. Yeah. So that's $1.99, English, Japanese, and Chinese. And apparently it kind of feels like these patches now are just being labeled as a patch, not an adult patch. And so it might be anything that has adult patch in the name is getting rejected. But it is still, like, my speculation as far as sexual content as a tag or nudity as a tag being blacklisted to show up as the first few tags seems to have been wrong, or at least it doesn't seem to be the case now. But it definitely feels like on an average weekend where we were seeing adult games, we were seeing at least 3 or 4. Now we're seeing 1, maybe 2. Definitely feels like they've slowed down quite a bit. And you're still having the problem, certainly, as far as looking at all the games that come out on Steam. The vast majority of games that do come out on Steam are garbage, and that's true for adult games as much as just any other kinds of games. This Hoops FPS, for instance. I don't know why you would call a Hoops game a first-person shooter, even if you were shooting the basketball in first person. That just is going to cause confusion. This is online PvP only for $13.49, so we'll definitely say no to that. Planet Conqueror looks like garbage, so we'll say no to that. Cyberpool looks like a pool game with different kinds of tables, which there might be something to that idea. At a certain point, that's really just mini golf, though, as much as it's pool. It's $1.19 English only. 40 tables with stunning visuals. Is this stunning visuals, or is this just neon visuals? Looks to me like it's just neon visuals. I'm gonna skip this. It's just not quite up there. One of the things I would like to say too is that I haven't played Pinball FX3 in a while, and I only spotlighted it for like three hours, or had it running for less than 4. Some of these recommendations or games based on previous games you've played don't seem like they really focus in on older games you've played. So it creates a feeling, definitely, that we've seen a lot of games here that they've related back to Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Would I want to play a game exactly like Mirror's Edge Catalyst after just finishing playing Mirror's Edge Catalyst? Probably not. I imagine some players would be that way, but not everybody. They need to dig deeper and go back a year or 2, or 3 or 4, or 5 or 6, or even 8 years, and say, hey, you haven't played this kind of game in a long time. Maybe that's because you hated this style of game, but maybe it's just because there hasn't been something to remind you about that. This Relics 2, The Crusader's Tomb, is just a straight up text-based adventure, which we're starting to see some of those come back. Bones Cafe, it's just a cook serve delicious game, so nothing there that interests me. Serious Sam Tormental, another Devolver Digital / Crow Team Serious Sam game. Top-down twin-stick shooter. It's already on my wish list because of its positivity. I don't know how it made it to the wish list. This came out, this must have been in early access or something, and then they republished it or took it out of early access. Or what? I have no idea how this would even be on the wish list otherwise. Yeah, and this looks interesting enough, certainly, to stay on the wish list, so I'm not going to make any changes there. And then we have a game called Chestmate, which is a tower defense puzzle game. For a second there, I thought it was a map reading puzzle game, but nope, it's more of a tower defense game. So I'm going to say no to that. Then we have our GameDeveloper.com articles, which, again, if I could say, get this red background here to go away while keeping the image, that would be nice, but that seems like that's going to be fairly hard to do. And I guess that's the way if you're running a website, to make your pictures stand out and prove that they are from your website versus somewhere else. Regardless, I blocked everything else out visually on GameDeveloper.com articles. So yeah, Riot Games is going to drop the vaccine and mask mandates at the LA office. This was April 7th that this came out. A Riot spokesman said the changes are in line with the public health recommendations. Some of the offices are getting rid of the mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Apparently there's a whole online service that I'm not aware about to verify that you have all the vaccines. It's called like Workplace or something. But I know some offices, this story was updated previously, where some offices were going to keep it, some offices weren't. It all seems kind of ridiculous, and that probably is an unfair article against Riot Games and Activision Blizzard, because they're probably doing or trying to do what everybody else in the area is also doing, and they're getting raked over the coals by GameDeveloper.com and other news sites just because of all the other controversies around them. Apparently the industry analyst NPD group is merging with IRI to expand its operations, which that's kind of news about analysts, so that's probably not very much actual video game news. We already talked about Activision Blizzard making over 1,000 QA contractors full-time employees. You can make them all full-time employees, certainly, though, and then slowly fire them over the course of 6 months. Also, I wonder if there is that kind of probationary period for things like unemployment if you're converted from a contractor to a full-time employee. If you start all of a sudden at a 6-month probationary period all over again. Let's see. Blizzard has altered Overwatch's heroes' outfits after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Overwatch hero Zara is losing her trademark Z symbol due to accidental overlap with the ongoing Russian propaganda. I don't know what the Z symbol really is, though, around that. Let's see. Letter Z first appeared in conflict in bright white letters painted on Russian vehicles massing near the Ukrainian border. There's some speculation that it stands for the word Zapad, which means west. The letter isn't used in the Cyrillic alphabet. Yeah, they're really making a big story around Well, Overwatch could have easily not changed the outfit, and GameDeveloper.com could have easily not talked about it. And then, of course, Game Developer has their own agenda, so they're going back to Jesse McCree's controversy from nearly a year ago. To talk about something that people lost interest in hearing about, and accused of sexual assault, and then which that accusation never seemingly went anywhere. Otherwise, you would be saying was found guilty of it instead of just being accused of it. Improbable apparently raised $150 million to accelerate its metaverse pivot. I couldn't even tell you if Improbable was a video game company, though. So I'll leave it at that because I don't care about the metaverse. The game Unpacking was named Game of the Year at BAFTA Game Awards, which I guess more people were hyped about that game than I thought. But then again, also getting an award doesn't mean people actually bought the game or played the game. The former Jagex boss Rod Cousins has been appointed the co-CEO of Huge Games, which, okay, that might mean something big is might be a big thing, it might not. Like, before he joined Jagex, he served as the CEO of Codemasters, which, yeah, Codemasters I think is still making racing games, not so much anything else. And then Take-Two is selling $2.7 billion worth of senior notes to raise cash for a Zynga deal. Senior notes, I assume, would be a type of stock. Although I have no idea what a senior note really is. I've never even heard that as a phrase. Interesting. And then we have a game here in VR called Red Matter, which is very positive but requires VR, so that'll stay on the fall list. This is the fall list cleanup. Recontact London is mixed, so that can leave the fall list. Recompile is mostly positive. Yeah, Metroidvania hacking adventure. It's not in early access, so I guess that goes to the wish list. Recall is from June 25th, 2021 and has only 6 user reviews, so I think that has to leave the fall list. I don't see enough here to give me a reason to give it more time. Realms of the Enemy is from 2020. It's a ninja VR game and has only 4 things, and it's been in early access in 2020. Realms of Eternity is the name of it, not Realms of the Enemy. Realm Walk of Souls. I think I'll give this some more time, and I may even have to make an executive decision just to say maybe I do want to play this game. But it would have to be fairly cheap. A lot of these games probably should just stay on the fall list, and then it would be nice if I could have multiple tiers on the wish list and say, sure, if I run out of everything else on the wish list, I might consider this, but otherwise I'm not going to consider it. The Realm engine. is still early access from March 2021. I'm gonna give that more time. Here we have a really weird pool, which is a better looking pool table concept than the neon one we just saw, but still doesn't have enough relevancy, so that's gotta leave the fall list. Real life, as far as a visual novel. Real life plus. I think I want to leave this on the fall list, or potentially just put it on the wish list. This is a kind of interesting visual novel romance story, if I recall correctly, in which you're actively growing up with your love interest. So you see her in kind of elementary school dress and then middle school dress, and like each year she's getting older and more mature, and the idea, I think, is to say the right things and interact with her throughout the course of her life to win her when she's older as a romantic interest. And there might be some weirdness certainly around that, but then there might be something fairly interesting around that too. Very rarely, and only in a video game form, could you tell a story like that, where you have to make the right moves over the course of your childhood to do the right thing. Ready or Not here is rated very positively, but it's early access still. That's a first-person shooter player versus player game. Really, I think I could probably remove this from the fall list. I just don't think it's my type of game. It definitely feels like it's trying to be a modern day SWAT or Rainbow Six Siege type experience, but it's not really the kinds of games I would want to play. And then here we have a ReZero visual novel, ReZero being a anime, so there is that connection. Yeah, ReZero is actually a fairly popular anime game, so I can put this on the wish list. Although, in all fairness, I don't think I'd be particularly enthusiastic around playing this visual novel / strategy game. We're calling it a tactical adventure game, but I'm not really seeing any gameplay that's too much around actual gameplay and not just talking. Definitely feels like it's just talking. Alright, so yeah, I'll put that on the wish list. And that will be 3 hours and 13 minutes that we've been going. So let me just scroll down my Twitter feed. Also, I had to redo the ad blocking on. I had to redo the ad blocking, or I will have to do the ad blocking on any website. So yeah, Twitter has a lot of garbage actually, that as far as a sidebar on the left and the right, and then a top bar that hovers, and just a lot of stuff that you don't always need to have visible. Well, I guess we'll talk about Yummy Girl 2 that came out on Steam an hour ago, which also looks like a adult game. Not a good quality one, but it doesn't bump the number up a little bit more. Guardians of the Galaxy developer says the game is finding its audience, especially on Game Pass, following a slow start. Which, in all fairness, I kind of agree with that it does kind of feel like it was a slower start than it really should have been for Guardians of the Galaxy, and it oddly doesn't feel like it has grown. The the new Lego Star Wars game, everything I'm seeing about it makes it look pretty great. There might be some weirdness, certainly, with my heavy level of familiarity with the older Lego games, in just how a few things will be different, but I honestly think different is for the better, generally speaking, and it looks like it's an improvement in the aspects that really matter. Okay, so what else can I say? Once again, as far as live streaming Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters, there was no bugs on my computer, no lockups, no freezes, no stutters. My third monitor, I think, may be failing me, so I'll swap that out as a test. But we've had 0 frames due to network being dropped. We've had 102 frames out of nearly 800,000 missed due to rendering lag. So 46 frames skipped out of 700,000 due to encoder lag. It's 0.0% on everything. So yeah, it's just been another perfect stream. So maybe it was just EA Origin and a bad BIOS, and maybe everything is fixed now. Maybe I can desperately hold on to that hope, and I'll need to move on to the next game now that I'm done with Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and see if the next game can put my computer through its paces and prove that it's not running into trouble. Anyways, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.